The racial tensions in the US, the legitimate protests, the horrible lawlessness and the partisan politics dominate global affairs again today, and there are efforts to draw links to Australia, as I'll show you later. What's happening in America now has many historic antecedents, and it emanates from deeply ingrained historical grievances and injustices. But from what's unfolded already, this civil unrest is worse than the US saw in Ferguson, Missouri 6 years ago, and certainly now it's the worst since 1992, when more than 60 people were killed over a week of rioting in Los Angeles after police were filmed beating African-American man Rodney King. But this episode is not yet over. We hope it ends soon. But it's widespread across the US, starting near the centre of the country in Minneapolis, of course, just over a week ago when African-American man George Floyd was callously and inexplicably killed by police on the street. But the anger has now spread from coast to coast, from Los Angeles to New York, and with myriad peaceful protests, we've also seen rampant rioting, mob rule, looting and senseless violence. Often the stores and properties damaged have belonged to African-American families, like this woman who wonders aloud whether her black life matters to the mob who wrecked her shop. And African-Americans have been killed too. Listen to the pain, anguish and frustration in this video after a retired policeman was shot and lay dying after he confronted looters taking TVs from a St. Louis shop.
OG, come on, stay with me, OG, stay with me. Over TV, cuz. Over TV, pop them, cuz.
The man killed was David Dawn, formerly a local police chief.
Because of his extensive police background, when the alarm would go off at the business, he'd go there to check out the situation, had a key to the business. Apparently, that's what he did last night when the business was broken into, and he was shot and killed around 2:30 a.m. Dorn is being remembered as someone who was well-respected and loved.
It pierced my heart because he came on board Moline Acres as a stranger to us, but he parted as a friend.
Such a terrible waste of a good African-American man trying to do the right thing. America has long been a tinderbox for racial tensions. It's got a sad and tragic history, which is why the killing of George Floyd justifiably provoked such intense and widespread anger. It was a cruel signal that not enough had changed, that in the land of the free, racial discrimination remains a life and death issue. But the hyper-partisanship of American politics has inflamed this too. The polarisation has been fuelled in large part by Donald Trump in recent years, but certainly by many others too, especially from the hard left. And whether or not the president could have done anything more to quell the unrest, we can't really know. But what we do know is that anti-Trump forces are using the chaos to target him. Democrat presidential candidate in waiting, Joe Biden, has made his first appearance in weeks. He made some worthy points.
There's no place for violence, no place for looting or destroying property or burning churches or destroying businesses, many of them built by the very people of color who for the first time in their lives are beginning to realize their dreams and build wealth for their families. Nor is it acceptable for our police, sworn to protect and serve all people, to escalate tension, resort to excessive violence.
But Biden was also provocative, denouncing violence in the same breath he used that same word to describe the president's actions.
We need to distinguish between legitimate peaceful protests and opportunistic violent destruction. We have to be vigilant about the violence that's being done by this incumbent president to our economy and to the pursuit of justice.
The Democrats are looking to blame Trump for the civil unrest, for the chaos. The president is seeking to blame leftist protesters. Such complex issues around a long-standing schism, so much chaos, and we see an ugly blame game. Solutions seem a long way off.
The moment has come for our nation to deal with systemic racism, to deal with the growing economic inequity that exists in our nation, to deal with the denial of the promise of this nation, made to so many.
fine sentiments, but you have to remind yourself that Biden was vice president for 8 years, to the first African-American president. So if we still face systemic racism, isn't that an indictment on his record as much as it is of the records of all presidents, including the current incumbent? Still, Biden's effort to blame Trump will win plenty of support from the media. Most of the media has been in lockstep with the Democrats, trying to delegitimise Trump from the outset, whether it was over Russiagate or that later impeachment effort. Trump has limited power, of course, as we talked about last night on Law and Order, and he is floundering, and his many enemies see this as a chance to hound him from office in November. It's an ugly and dangerous concoction of real discrimination leading to injustice and racial resentment, fuelled by opportunistic lawlessness, inflammatory politics and anarchy. Politicians and commentators should be calling for calm and condemning the chaos, but instead we get this.
Now, too many see the protests as the problem. No, the problem is what forced your fellow citizens to take to the streets: persistent and poisonous inequities and injustice. And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Protests should never be violent. Full stop. Many onlookers here are getting a direct taste of what it's like to support violent protests. Pretty soon it becomes impossible to control the boundaries.
Why are you... We're on your side! We're on your side! Holy
And as I predicted last night, even our media is trying to get in on the act, turning this minor and understandable, if not scary and unfortunate incident in the middle of the White House protests into yet another example of the evils of Trump's America.
I think it was shocking for everybody. This is actually the second incident involving an Australian news team. Actually, in Minnesota a few days ago, an entire news crew was detained, at least briefly, and cuffed for covering the protests there. But the sad fact of the matter is that this is now, over the past week, become normal practice.
When police are being run over, when retired police officers are being shot dead, when 3 of the 4 policemen who crushed the life out of George Floyd are yet to be charged, when shops and houses are being wrecked and burned and Americans are afraid to go onto the streets, then a cameraman getting shoved during a dangerous protest is hardly the issue. I first brought this episode to your attention, the George Floyd episode to your attention, a week ago tonight. I think we might have been the first program in Australia to show that appalling George Floyd killing on television here. And the situation in the US has worsened every day since then. It's now past midnight again on all of mainland America. It is morning in America right now, but unlike that hopeful Ronald Reagan slogan, this time there's a U in the word.